Hello, everyone. I'm Liz Koch. I'm the producer of the Brooklyn Book Festival, and I wanted to welcome you today. And we're so lucky. We had this amazing day of weather following some pretty miserable weather in New York City lately. So we hope everybody really enjoys the day and the authors and the programs that we're presenting on all 8 stages. We're now in our 18th year of presenting free literary programming, and we have different ways that you can choose to support the festival if you would like to. We have a sales booth over here. All t-shirt sales and tote sales support our free programming. You can also feel welcome to donate to the festival at our website at www.brooklynbookfestival.org. In the meantime, enjoy this wonderful day of programming and buy lots of books. Show the love to the authors.
Hey, y'all. Can you hear me okay?
Check.
My colleague is telling me to speak louder. Can you hear me okay now? Oh my God, so many thumbs up. Amazing. I'm Natalie Green, Director of Programs and Partnerships at the National Book Foundation. Thank you. Woo! Yes, it's very exciting. I'm thrilled to join the Brooklyn Book Festival and welcoming you to this event in partnership with NBF. Brooklyn Book Festival is a free book-loving festival powered almost entirely by volunteers. 3 huge cheers to their work, and most especially Liz Koch, producer, alongside Anna, Stefan, Jerry, and Adrian. Woo! We're so happy to be back at the Brooklyn Book Festival to celebrate National Book Foundation honored authors and their work. Year-round, we partner on education and public programming in 48 states and counting. We're so nearly in all 50, but that doesn't make it any less special to be in our hometown. Come find us in the marketplace at booth number 309, where we're selling all 50 of our current 2023 National Book Award longlisters in partnership with our friends at Books Are Magic. We're busy preparing for the National Book Awards ceremony on Wednesday, November 15th, which is in 6 weeks, but don't tell me that. And you're all invited to tune in online. You can register for the broadcast for free at nationalbook.org/awards. And now I can get to the good stuff for today's event. I have the enormous pleasure of chatting with 3 National Book Foundation 5 under 35 honorees, Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah, Alexandra Chang, and C Pam Zhang. You can applaud. They're phenomenal. Our 5 under 35 program celebrates, you guessed it, 5 incredibly talented debut fiction authors under the age of 35 each year. 5 under 35 honorees are selected by past National Book Foundation honored authors, and it's a surefire sign that we all can't wait to read what's next from them. And even better, today we get to gather with 3 folks to talk about exactly that, fresh off of their second books. We're going to hear some brief teasers from their new works, chat, and I promise to try to save at least 1 or 2 audience questions time for you at the very end before we scurry over to the book signing, which is over to our right. We're at signing table E with thanks to Greenlight Bookstore. I'm almost done talking, I promise, but I'm really briefly going to read their illustrious bios. Nana Kwame Adjei-Brenyah is the author of the best-selling short story collection Friday Black and the novel Chain Gang All-Stars, which is a current longlister for the 2023 National Book Award for Fiction. His work has appeared or is forthcoming in numerous publications, including Guernica, Compose, Printers Row, and Breakwater Review, where he was selected by ZZ Packer as the winner of the 2nd annual Breakwater Review Fiction Contest. He is from Spring Valley, New York. He graduated from SUNY Albany and went on to receive his MFA from Syracuse University. Alexandra Chang is the author of Days of Distraction and Tomb Sweeping. Her writing has appeared in the New York Times, Harper's Bazaar, Guernica, and elsewhere. She lives in my hometown right now, Ventura County, California. We did not plan that. C Pam Zhang is the author of Land of Milk and Honey and How Much of These Hills is Gold, winner of the Academy of Arts and Letters Rosenthal Family Foundation Award and the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature, longlisted for the Booker Prize, a finalist for the Penn Hemingway Award and the National Book Critics Circle John Leonard Prize, and one of Barack Obama's favorite books of the year. She is a New York Public Library Coleman Fellow. And now I'm going to dig in with sort of why we're all gathered today. I just want to talk transparently about what it was like returning to the page after publishing debuts that were beloved and celebrated and found readers, and what what was it like to sort of get back to the writing part? And maybe, Nana, do you want to kick us off?
I can start. And before I get fully into my answer, not to embarrass Alexandra, but because her first book came out in pandemic, this is her first ever real festival. So, yeah. We also went to the same MFA, so we're like part of the same gang. So it's a big deal for me. Yeah, I think on Twitter I was joking around that the other title for this event could have been "Fuck a Sophomore Slump,"
Yeah.
because I think there's whether you have it initially or not, there's like almost like this presumed worry that you can't do it again. And even if you don't have it yourself, I felt as though when I was doing my tour the first time, people kind of ask you like, well, are you afraid for the next time? Are you stressed out about doing it again? And I was like, well, now, a little, you know. But I think that it's felt good to, because I wrote so much of this pandemic, it kind of became something for me to do. It took me about 7 years, but it became like my sort of like sourdough bread project, you know? And working on something every day during that difficult time made it sort of just like this consistent thing for me that was outside the context of perceived failure or otherwise in the context of the first book. And so I just let it be. But it was very cool to have it out in the world finally, because in the back of your mind, there is that fear, that stress that maybe I, you know, won't be able to do it again or something. Because it's a crazy thing to do, to write a book at all.
I think it's so crazy to publish one book, and y'all already did too, so.
It's nuts.
Alexandra, do you want to go?
So I think my experience is slightly different because I did write half of the book before the first book came out. So my second book is a collection of stories, and a bunch of them are older. I think the oldest one I wrote 9 years ago, and I think returning to the page, both to edit these older stories and to write new stories after the first book, I felt like just like a different person. Not only because the first book changed me, but because the years of time that had passed changed who I am as a person and as a writer. So definitely can relate to like the fear and the anxiety of putting a second book out, because that first book, there's so much, I don't know, there's so much unknown. You don't know anything about the publishing process. You don't know anything about what's to come. With the second book, you've had that experience, and that is, for me at least, it felt almost like a little bit of a burden to know what was going to come and have more of that fear. But like Nana said, that's at the back of your mind, and returning to the page is like, I don't know, having that personal relationship again with your writing and having to put all of that external stuff out of mind. I think I just had to train myself to be a writer again after the first book.
Yeah. And Pam, is this freshest for you? Pam launched last week and is here with us. Oh my God.
Okay, can everyone hear me? Is this okay? Yeah, thank you all for being here in Brooklyn with us. For me, I think the best piece of writing advice I ever got, and one I thought about a lot when working on the second book, was write as if the world has ended and everyone you know and love is dead, which sounds like horrifically depressing, but actually I feel like that's the kind of privacy that I need to have when I'm writing a book and creating an entire world. And so I think that, you know, what's kind of both strange and delightful about having one book out is when it is successful and praised, as I think all of our books were, right? There's a little bit of a fear that jumps into my heart that, oh, is this all I can do? And so for me, my second book ended up being very different and very sort of like internal and of the body, because I was really interested in seeing if I could do something else. I think that more than anything for me, writing as a career is about not being bored. It's about finding whatever that source of joy is internally and just pursuing it. It's been fun to see how that has changed. And as I work on, you know, other books, to think about what I very much respond to what Alexandra said about being a different person, and just being like, who am I right now and what am I interested in at this moment?
Oh, I love that. Nana, do you want to do us the honors of Fuck the Sophomore Slump and read us some of your novel?
Absolutely. I really like what Pam just said about like not being bored, and I love one of the cool things about the second time around is the work doesn't let you like find itself do the same tricks you used the first time, you know. So you're almost forced to be a different person or have a better eye or a different eye, and so it's one of the really fun things about this whole writing thing. Actually, I'm gonna read from the middle of my new book. It's a chapter from the point of view of someone who's spent some time or is in the middle of spending time in solitary confinement. It's kind of a downer now that I'm thinking about it. But then so is my entire writing career. Like everything I've ever written is sort of a downer, so. This chapter is called Simon Craft. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but I'll read a piece of it. There's a bed and a shit tin. Dark in here most of the day, but they glow in my brain. The hole is black. I only see when the door opens. The door opens one time a day. I sit, sleep, sing, flex, breathe, stretch, shake, cough, shit here. Here is where I come apart. 100 days ago, they started to kill me again. I've died so many times. Now I must be unkillable. I am the undying. It's a hard, wonderful life. 117 days ago, a man didn't like me. I killed a man 117 days ago. They threw me in. Don't ever count, but you have to count. Nothing lasts in the hole in hell, but to pass the time before whatever is next, I lick the floor and taste my own sweat. This body can't be killed. This body is stronger than it was before. I press the earth down every morning. I press it down first 200 times. Now, I press it down more times than I can count. I can't do many numbers anymore. I count to 24, and it's hard for me to remember what comes next. So I start again. Do it again. Do it again. It's hard for me to think of words that start with the letter J. You never know what will leave. Justice. I'm still here. Jelly. And in that chapter, there's just a little footnote that says solitary confinement has been consistently found nationally and internationally to induce anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations, depression, panic attacks, memory loss, and other cognitive defects. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Nana. So this is in no way a spoiler, but I think something that connects all three of these works is they deal in different ways with the idea of dystopia, even if that's caused by very literally what's happening in our present day or in a near future, be it imagined or real. So I wanted to talk a little bit about this idea that dystopic fiction used to be sort of almost like a subgenre, and now sort of to the point of Pam's writing advice, now that we're approaching the end of the world in a whole bunch of different ways, like how do you think about dystopic writing or dystopia within your fiction? Pam, do you want to kick us off this time?
Yeah, it's really interesting because speaking of the internal process of writing and the external process of putting a book out in the world, I don't know about you two, but genre labels are not something I think of when I'm writing. I'm just writing what feels alive to me at the moment. And it has been interesting to see these labels of dystopia or speculative fiction or whatnot put on my work. And I do think that there is this question to me right now today in contemporary literature of like, what does it even mean to be speculative fiction or dystopia? Because I think like what is happening today is so often outside the realm of imagination or just like so far at the edge that I think what dystopic fiction can help us do is it might take us like one half step beyond what's happening today. And through that distance, we are able to see how messed up the systems we currently live in are. Sort of, it causes, because I think when a mild dystopia is the water that we sort of swim in every day, you need that kind of distance. You need to say, wait, if this is the path we're heading on, and it might get this bad one day. What when we look at the world that we're currently in?
Did you say mild dystopia?
Mild dystopia.
I love that. I'm gonna put that on a T-shirt. That's so good. Everything Pam said, 100% for me. I also write, and I don't really think much of genre labels, and I'm not even aware of them, to be honest. The first time I saw the word speculative, which I know now because I see it so much, but it was in a review for something of mine,
Yeah.
and I was like, "How dare you?" You know? And then I found out what that word meant, and I was like, "Oh yeah, that is me, I guess." You know? So, but in terms of dystopia, dystopia is it's kind of everywhere, just depending on where you're sitting. I remember when Salvation City came out, and that's like a dystopic novel about like pandemic that plagues the planet or whatever. And if I would have told you for 2.5 years we're gonna have to do everything over Zoom, it would have been like a dystopic story. And let alone all the different various injustices that we see at every turn of our current civilization. I think that working in what people identify as dystopia means that we're paying particular attention to like the suffering that is avoidable, and reminding us that we can do better in these things that we sort of take for granted, whether it be in sort of climate things, or in my case, I was speaking a lot about the prison industrial complex, which is a great exporter of suffering, but reminding us that this great suffering is here right now, as opposed to like there's something far off in the future. And I feel like we're all sort of interested in doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. I do think my work tends to take place in the now. So the now of mild dystopia is definitely what I'm interested in capturing. I do like what Nana and Pam are both saying. We live in a dystopic society. We have so many, social harms that are in the world. And for me in fiction, what's important is capturing how these forces affect individual people. And a lot of my fiction is about ordinary people who are living very ordinary lives, who are struggling because of something outside of their control, whether that's technologically based, whether that's something based off of their own background, who they are as a person, their class, their gender, their race. So I don't usually think of my fiction as dystopic. If we are classifying things as genre, I think of it just as capturing the very real pain that all of us live through.
Do you want to read for us some of the pain?
Yeah. So I
Or
am
the happy
going...
things, if you want.
No, it's dark. I don't think there's not much happy stuff. I mean, I was
Same.
at a recent event and somebody commented like, "Oh, your characters deal with so much disappointment and so much loss. Like, how do they escape disappointment?" And I was like, I don't know. I honestly don't know. And oftentimes they go very interior to sort of escape whatever is outside. And the person asking this question was like, "Well, that's depressing, that the only way to escape disappointment is to go inside your head." And I was like, "No, I mean, connection
called being
to
a writer.
people." Yeah.
Right. I'm a writer. Fuck off.
I mean, this is what I'm interested in writing, so that's what you get. I'm going to read from the first story, which is about a character who has lost her job. She's been laid off, and then she gets a house-sitting gig for a wealthy couple. The deck was my favorite feature, made of dark stained wood and wrapped along two sides of the house that overlooked the hills. At noon each day, I ate a lunch of nuts, a salad, and a stove-grilled vegetarian sausage from the market, a 15-minute drive down the hill, and afterward went out on the deck to tan. I made sure to apply the owner's tanning oil each time. I'd lie flat and still as a corpse in a bikini on the chaise longue, as the owners had called it, sometimes topless, sometimes occupied with a book pulled from the home's shelves. I'd turn my body a dozen times, imagining myself slowly cooking like an animal on a spit. I pretended this would be my life forever. Sometimes as I lay there, I felt as though I were dissolving, what distinguished my body from its surroundings melting away. Occasionally, the sensation frightened me, but most of the time I was relieved. I wouldn't matter anymore. I would no longer be matter. Always the feeling would pass, and I would return to my body and its boundaries. When I was done each day, I would take a photo of myself against one of the house's exterior walls, lines of sweat visible on my face. The house was the color of my skin, or close enough, a mauve pink with undertones of brown. I wanted to document my progress of blending in. And on there.
Thank you. And I'm a total nerd, so the story's called Unknown by Unknown.
Ooh.
And so I wanted to ask a nerdy craft question about how each of you as writers, like, what are your knowns and unknowns when you come to the page? Like, sort of what do you come first with, and then maybe what surprises you once you're there? Alexandra, do you want to kick us off?
For me, I go to the page really wanting not to know what's going to happen. A lot of the pleasure of writing is discovery and not knowing where a sentence is going to lead, where a story is going to go. So oftentimes I'll have a voice or a line of dialogue or just like an idea of a scene. Like this story did start with this image of a woman tanning on this deck, and I didn't know what was going to happen. And if, as you've read the story, it takes like a dark turn into horror, and that for me is the fun. Yeah, I really don't want to know where a story is going to lead.
Nana, what about for you?
I agree that I try my best to let the story and the characters in particular let me know where it's going to go. But what I usually have is like a general premise, like a situation or like a sort of context that's usually not super fun, and like kind of pressing down on my characters, putting pressure on them. And I always tell my students, like, they'll be like, oh, I want to write a story with like dragons and, lactose intolerant ghosts or something. And I'm like, great, and whatever they say, because that's not really where the story comes from. It's just like in the execution and what happens out of that premise. But I usually have something like that premise, and sometimes that idea or like the situation or the context will be stewing in my mind for like often years, but I don't feel like I go into the page until I have what is known to me is like the voice or thought structures of a person who has lived in that context for a long time. So if I have the idea of like how would it sound if I have a story in my first book where every day ends in a nuclear annihilation, right? So someone who's died over and over and over and over again and also has a lot of power. What would she sound like? What would be like? What would she see? What would she value? And I don't know everything about her, but I have like a general sense of like the way she sees things, and that helps me. That's sort of the known part that starts to like is like the first spark to get the fuse going. It's a good question.
Pam, do you like surprises?
Oh, I love surprises. I think we all do. I start with an image and a voice and urgency, some kind of emotional urgency, which often means that a character is starting at a moment of crisis. But something I've realized and kind of learned in writing my second book is what I also need at the beginning of a project is a sense of love. Like, what does this character love? If there are stakes, if there's crisis, what is driving them? What are they wanting? What is the other thing that they're imagining that sort of keeps them going? And so I will say that, like, yes, all our fictions have some form of mill dystopia, but I would say that, like, certainly in Nana's and Alexandra's and my own work, there's also a lot of love and beauty, and it's sort of, I think that is one of the most urgent questions of living in a dystopia is like, how do you continue to orient yourself towards beauty and joy, even if in a small way, right? Because when you sort of read headlines or you read like the premise of our world, it all sounds so grim and depressing. But most of us in our lives, we have something that keeps us going. We have something that we're still sort of like anchoring in.
I love that so much, and Pam actually stole a question from my paper, which is embarrassing just for me. But we'll circle back to that after. Pam, can you read us some of your beautiful novel?
Sure, sorry to steal a question.
I love it.
I promise we didn't coordinate this ahead of time. So my novel takes place in a world in which a smog has descended and killed the majority of food crops. And so the nature of food for most people on Earth is pretty grim. They're all eating this kind of like Soylent-esque meal replacement. And my book is about an American chef exiled in Europe who ends up taking this mysterious job on a mountaintop community of the uber wealthy where crops and animals are abundant. And so this is a scene where she first enters the kitchen on the mountaintop. I spotted a box behind the kitchen door. Impress me, this note said. Inside were flour, vanilla, eggs. I'd expected a test, of course. A textbook omelet or a flawless consommé to prove the French training the job demanded. Pastry, no. Giddiness abandoned me as I unpacked baking soda, sugar, milk. Even the voluptuousness of the butter couldn't distract from thoughts of my spotty experience in patisserie, and the precarity of my work visa, and what would happen where I turned away. And then I was no longer thinking, because at the bottom of the box I touched something as warm as skin, as yielding as a woman's inner thigh. Strawberries. Amen, I heard myself say, wet-mouthed. I was surprised my breath didn't smudge the air. Red, that color of desire. I began again and said the whole prayer, Our Father through daily bread. Not my words. They belonged to a pastry chef I'd loved, a lapsed Catholic who rediscovered his faith each morning as he fingered the day's shipment of fruit, and forgot it anew each afternoon as we fucked among the butter and jam. He was the first to take seriously my appetites, my ambitions. He never stored a strawberry cold. Close to the stem, he said, closest to the earth, their perfume is complex, not sugar. Closer to flesh, the flesh of a loved one. Not sanitized, not anodyne, but full of many waters. Strawberries in spring, strawberries in musk, strawberries in sex flooded back as I crushed my tongue to sugar. I'd come to that country hardly daring for bitter green, and here, now, this rupturing sweetness. I couldn't remember what hour it was, how many time zones I'd crossed, when I'd last eaten. For years I'd fed, survived, swallowed my portions of gray. But had I hungered for pleasure?
Oh, so good. I want to talk about strawberries and sex. And to go back to Pam's question, I want to talk a little bit about there's so much desire and love and tenderness amidst the hardness of all of your work. And I'd love to hear just a little bit about like how much of a conscious act that is in your writing process, like saving tenderness for your words or for your stories or for even yourself as a writer in this world. Does anybody want to take that first, Nana?
It's a really good question. And I think when I think about where that love or tenderness or kind of hope comes, it's a pretty interesting existential question about like writing and life, but I think that if you look at anyone or something long enough, you could learn to love them a little bit. If you pay enough attention to someone, if you care enough about their contours and nuances, you can find something to love. And in the process of writing, this is kind of why I like revision so much and why revision is the bigger part of my process. Every time I look again, even the worst quote-unquote character, I can see a little bit of good in them. I can see a little bit of something, their desire, their love. There's some desire for goodness that somehow went askew. And by every time you revise, you're sort of infusing love again and again and again. And so to me, I don't know if it's exactly conscious. I think I hope that when I'm my highest self, I tend towards love and hope. And I think through writing and through revision, I try my best to like channel that part of me. But I think it's a product mostly like materially from that revising and being willing to look again and see like where I was a little bit limited, where I was a little bit generous, where I could have shown a little bit more care. And over years of doing that, the whole thing rises to a more loving kind of place, I think. And so I think it's conscious because I think at this point I understand that's what happens, but it's not like, I don't know if I'm ever like, or I know I'm never like, well, let me be like 20% more loving here. but it kind of just happens as part of the process that I've adopted. It's a good question.
I love that. Alexandra?
I'd say I'm semi-conscious of it. The characters who I'm drawn to writing, or the voices that I'm drawn to writing, typically are people who I, even if they're made up, have a lot of love for. I don't know that I necessarily want to write characters who I don't have any love for. And it's like what you're saying, Nana, where you probably, the longer you look at someone, the longer you spend time with a character or a person, the more you find these qualities in them that are worthy of love. But there is this, I don't remember who said this, but somebody said, write about what breaks your heart. And I think that is what I gravitate towards. And the idea of like something breaking your heart means that you have love for whatever that situation is. And it's just a love that hurts, I guess. And I think Pam talked about this too, Nana, you talked about this, like writing stories that are dark, that have pain, that have like loss, that have grief. It's not, I don't know, that doesn't exist without like the other side of the coin, without pleasure, without love, without hope. And that's why we experience like both of those two contrasting emotions. And it's important for me to have those in my stories. It can't just be like one emotional note. So that's how I think of it. I think it comes in through revision, but it also comes in through living life. It like naturally comes onto the page.
Yep.
I started writing my second novel during the pandemic, which is a really bleak time, and the world of the protagonist is very bleak at the outset. And I became really bullish about with the realization that, I mean, it sounds so cheesy to say, but love and joy and beauty are essential, right? I think during the pandemic, we all had this, as a society, had this watershed moment where we realized that even if we had what we then call the essentials, like our health and a shelter over our heads and food to eat and water to drink, that wasn't enough, right? Being separate and having those essentials wasn't enough. So I do think love is essential, and I really respond to this idea of it coming out in revision. I was sort of thinking back through my own revision process after Nana said that, and I think that's true. Like, you need to be able to see all your characters in their wholeness, and you need to be able to perhaps not forgive them all their trespasses, but to be able to understand where those come from. And certainly on the page, and I think increasingly in life, attention is a form of love. I think attending to something and to someone is like the greatest form of love, being able to see them and acknowledge them. And I actually think that is one of the joys, actually, of writing dystopian or dark or grim fiction as well, is it gives the reader and the writer that particular strange pleasure of being like, I see myself in something of my experiences, something of my sorrows reflected on the page, and seeing that is a little bit healing already.
Oh, I love that so much. And I could talk to these people all day, but I promised you 2 questions. So I'm going to let our brilliant stage manager set up a microphone. Oh, it's like here. We're going to bring it out. I know it takes a second to come down the stairs, but we'll have time for like 2-ish folks. And in the meantime, I'm going to squeeze in one more rapid fire round down the row. So 535, you're selected by National Book Foundation honored authors, like I mentioned. Now you all are National Book Foundation honored authors, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to shout out something, a book, anything that you've been loving on lately. Rapid fire round.
He's here right now, so I'm thinking about it. Alex Martino has a book coming out called Last Acts. Comes out in January.
Woo!
You should pay attention to that. And also Kelsey Norris has a book called,
House Gone Quiet.
House Gone Quiet. House Gone Quiet, Kelsey Norris. That's also coming in this month, I think. Very good book. Very great story collection. Sorry.
I love it.
Nana and Pam's books, obviously, which just came out recently. Also, shout out to Alex Martinez's book that's coming out January, also Syracuse grad. And I also recently read Terrace Story by Hilary Leichter, which was incredibly beautiful. Talk about grief and tenderness and joy and pleasure. So definitely recommend that. Yeah, I know. I missed her panel, unfortunately.
House Gone Quiet and Terrace Story are really great. I've recently been reading a lot of poetry. So Traveling with Me on Book Tour is a book of poems called, oh my God, now I'm having a brain fart. It's by the poet Sandra Lim. I think it's called The Curious Thing. And I think poetry is often a place I return to find a lot of the things that we're talking about in a really compressed and beautiful space.
I will happily keep filling this time because I adore all these books, but this microphone is right here for your audience questions, and you do need to speak them into the microphone just because we're recording and we want to make sure we can hear you. Does anybody have one?
Who wants to be that cool person?
I know you have to be a little brave because you have to step literally in front of us and everybody,
You have to be extremely brave and impressive.
but you get to talk to these folks. You just want me to keep going? Okay.
Yeah.
Someone.
Oh, I see a hand. Oh, this is so exciting.
What a cool, brave person.
Yay! We're so excited for your question.
Hi,
Hey.
my name's Abby. I was wondering, how do you write on the days where the words aren't coming?
Just in case everybody couldn't hear that, how do you write on the days when the words aren't coming? A beautiful prose poem.
I don't.
Great.
Yeah. I don't write. I go on walks with my dog. I stare at my cats for like half an hour or more. I watch TV and I just do other things. And I've gone through phases where I won't write for a while and I get anxious about it and nervous and frustrated. But I have gotten to a place in my life where I know it will come back, and I just have to trust that the writing will return to me and I will return to the writing.
I think that it depends on like where you're at in the process. Like say you're working on a project and I think that building routine can help. I was never like a routine-based writer. I was very like binge writer kind of thing. But for this last book, I was like, wake up, meditate, go to the gym, go do either 2 hours or 1,000 words. Eat after that, and I did that so many times. The thing I've been saying, it sounds like a joke, but it's real. I would get to like 950 words and my mouth would start watering because it was so like built into my like process. But I think that when the words won't come, as Alexandra said, you have to like take some pressure off of that because the writing can be a lot of things. Sometimes it's just being in the world, paying attention, being really present where you are. I think that also interrogating like what feels like the block is also writing, you know? Oftentimes when people talk about states when they can't write, they might use the word writer's block. They're sort of letting the editorial eye or voice become louder than that creative, fun, explorative person. And so sometimes it's just about, just write a sentence, have fun with it, whatever. And allowing that room for play, maybe, like that room for just, it doesn't have to be amazing, trusting revision. So for me, when I'm stuck, I'm trying to build up to that routine, because once I have the routine, it gets a lot easier, actually. I'll try to read something I love, like really love, and you know how that feels. That almost always sparks something. A lot of times it's poetry, actually, but something that you really love. Write a sentence that interests you or try to write a sentence that feels fun. Doesn't even have to be like narratively connected to what you're working on. Just write something that feels interesting in terms of language. Sometimes that helps. And also, if you really can, it's okay, you know. Be nice to yourself about it.
I also don't write when I really don't want to write, and when I feel that the well is depleted and I need to go fill it in other ways, because I'm with like Alexandra in that everything is writing. Walking is writing, having a conversation with someone you love is writing, absorbing something of the world so that you can put it back on the page is definitely writing. But also on the note of interrogating why, I think that's a really important instinct to develop, because when I'm teaching, I think what I've realized is oftentimes in my students' blockages and in my own blockages, sometimes what's actually happening is you're not really not wanting to write. what you're doing is, what you're actually feeling is a reluctance to write what you think you should be doing next.
Yes.
It might be because
Yes.
you're like, and it might actually be that you shouldn't be writing that anymore. If you've gone to a place where you're like, I'm bored and it feels like stifling and it feels like dull to like write the next scene where they make up after the fight, maybe you don't want to write that scene. Maybe you want to do something different. Maybe you want to erase the scene before. I think that the idea of finding what is exciting and not knowing and trying to bring that to the page is really important if you are feeling blocked.
Word.
Here I go. I'm asking another question because I don't see. Oh, I see somebody brave. Are you going to make your way to the microphone for us? Oh, a hero!
Da, da,
Yay!
da, 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 da,
Wow,
da,
this
da.
audience is
It's like
so
Price is
supportive.
Right.
It's amazing.
I love it.
Hi. All of you talked about kind of how you're different people now from when you began writing. And I was curious, as you age, are the things that are important to you different, and how does that show up in your writing?
Could everybody hear that one? Okay, cool.
I think I feel like I'm trying to like think of a concise version. But yeah, as you grow, so much changes. But to me, the biggest like change, or the thing I've noticed the most, is like when I first started, there's a very like, I'm sad and look at me. And just me, you know, and like my life is hard, and I am the one who has this anxiety, and it's very special and particular. And then as I sort of continued writing, it starts becoming sort of depersonalized. Even as I get more, as I started interrogating my own thing even more, I start seeing like, wait, this is like some of my issues that I think are just me are actually like products of systemic problems, but also like the absence of community problems. And basically, I guess I started to see like, through pain or whatever suffering that you're interrogating through your writing, it starts to go through like the portal of you and become everyone. I don't know how to say it. It becomes like the world. I don't know. And so like I think like the biggest macro feeling is that like my suffering and someone else's suffering are like connected in this really real way. And it became, even if I'm focused on myself or not, I found myself connected to this sort of like communal thing. So that exists materially in the actual writing in a lot of different ways. But, and then also I think I just got more comfortable being myself. For a long time I really resisted like the impulse towards humor, which is how I sort of like make my value in a room or something. I think I thought I had to be a serious writer. I couldn't be funny. I thought to be a serious writer, I had to be very like, use words that me or no one I know ever uses. And I let go of some of those things. And I think I started to feel more comfortable with, for better or worse, this is the kind of stuff I write, and just rolling with that. It's a good question.
Yeah. I feel like oh, there you are, Davey. Thank you for that question. I feel like I put so much of myself into the first book, and it was so draining emotionally and then so scary once it was out in the world that changed me as a person. But in terms of being a writer, it felt like, okay, I'm done with that. Like, I'm not as interested in that anymore. And this is kind of speaks to what Pam was speaking about earlier, that question of like, is that all there is that for me as a writer? And the answer is no. There's so much else that I want to write about. There's so many other concerns that I have in the world that I want to put on the page, and life itself just ends up infusing what I'm interested in. I would say like a lot of my newer stories in the book are about like caring for elders, caring for parents who are aging, and not something just because I'm interested in it, because it's something that I'm going through personally. And I think as writers and as people, life is constantly altering our perceptions. We're constantly going through these different transitions, and that is what I'm hoping like I will just carry with me as a writer and be able to continuously explore. I've said at other events like it's not limited to like a certain time period in our life. My first book is very much about like a young woman in her 20s, and of course that's a tumultuous time. But my mom, for example, recently retired, and she's going through a major transition. She has the same kinds of questions of like, who am I? What does my life look like now? What do I want out of this life? And so the questions that I'm interested in exploring in my writing are similar, but the concerns and the ways that the characters are being depicted is different, I guess. Yeah. I don't have as lofty of an experience as you of like me versus the community. I think I just, like you said, like want to roll with what I'm interested in, where the energy is, and not try to resist the impulses that I have, even if they're changing.
I felt very attacked by Nana's depiction of a younger writer. It's like, I'm so special, look at me. I think that's something I've definitely like grown past. I think that increasingly when I get to the page, my ego goes somewhere else. Like the best feeling when writing is when you disappear and you're just like in the flow of the words and that character and that experience. And so as I sort of like open myself up to those channels of emotion, I think what's happened is I've become a lot more earnest and a lot less afraid of sentimentality on the page. I think that as a younger writer, and I think I see this in many like younger writers, this kind of immature stance of needing to be smarter than the rest of the world, needing to see things more sharply, and needing to have like almost like a cynical special take on the way things are, right? But especially in my second novel, just on that discussion topic of like sort of writing love on the page, I'm less afraid. Like if this is a scene that has a lot of emotion, I'm going to sit there and I'm going to dwell on it. And yes, maybe there's a risk that someone may find that extremely cheesy or cliched, but I don't want to be afraid of that. I don't think that's something you can have in your head when you're writing. Amazing. So I think that's what it is. It's just like, no egos, guys. That guy could also be up here on center stage. So this earnestness, I think, is the thing that I've seen change the most.
Okay, I loved the skateboarder so much because I want to do one more rapid fire round around play, which I think was this beautiful idea that came up from the first audience question. And all of these books sort of delve really deeply and beautifully and strangely into specific topics, whether it be like nanny cams or delicious food or not delicious, like gray spongy food or reality TV shows. And I just want to talk about like, what was your favorite research rabbit hole that you embarked upon for this most recent book? Or maybe a new research hole from a new project you're working on. I don't know. Nana?
I started looking, this is not for this project, I started looking up all the nocturnal animals in Australia, and they have the weirdest fucking names, you guys. Like, just like, I'm not even going to say them, they're so ridiculous. Just Google, like, nocturnal animals in Australia and start reading, and you will start laughing.
Say unintentional research hole, maybe just like general life, I don't know, activity that I do is watch a ton of dating reality shows, probably
What's
too
your
many.
favorite?
Oh, Love Island. Probably Love Island, but I'm on a Love is Blind kick right now.
I had to cut myself off from Love Island because I would watch it before I fell asleep. And I'm insane. And so anytime there was a conflict mid-episode, which is how you craft a reality television show arc, I couldn't stop watching until the conflict was resolved, which was never at the end of an episode. It would end on a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
And then
So I
another
would
one.
just watch all night long. So I can't watch it
there are
anymore.
endless versions of
endless
this show.
content,
Yeah.
Nana, what about you?
For this last book, there was so much research, and I feel like this answer isn't that fun, but it's just something that was interesting to me. I had to go to a lot of like law stuff, like legal research, and there's a paper called it's a corporate law paper called "What is the MBA?" And it was really interesting because really interesting to me. I'm like super interesting. Everyone's like, because the MBA is like a very interesting corporate structure. Hey, it's Josie. It's my publicist. Because it's not like one company, but they're also not like the MBA is several companies that aren't in a very clearly defined connection with each other, because there's a governing board, and this doesn't operate like many other companies do. And so this paper like explores what it was, and that was just really interesting to me because I had like a similar structure in the book of the different prisons or whatever. So I was trying to think about how that could work. And anyways, for me, it was super interesting.
We find it interesting too, Nana. Okay.
You don't have to lie. It's okay.
Sadly, that is the end of our time. Please buy these beautiful books. They are so, so good. I could hand sell them all day, but don't make me. We're going to be signing right next door at Signing Table E. Come say hi, ask your questions with less pressure, and get your book signed. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.